Before most people in Brookhaven opened their curtains, someone had already been awake for more than an hour. The streets were still quiet. The bakery lights had only just come on. A single robin sang from the branches of an old maple tree. Morning belonged to the birds. And to Clara Whitmore. Every day, just before sunrise, the 78-year-old widow pushed a small green garden cart through the town square. Inside were 2 watering cans, a pair of worn gardening gloves, a small hand trowel, several packets of flower seeds, and a neatly folded cloth for wiping the park benches after the morning dew. No one had asked her to come. No one paid her. In fact, most people assumed someone else was responsible. Perhaps the parks department. Perhaps the town gardeners. Perhaps a volunteer group. Nobody really knew. For 12 years, the flowers in Brookhaven's public beds had bloomed beautifully each spring. Tulips gave way to lavender. Lavender welcomed daisies. By late summer, bright coneflowers and sunflowers filled the square with color. Children chased butterflies between the paths. Bees drifted lazily from blossom to blossom. Visitors often remarked, "What a beautiful town." Very few people ever wondered, who made it beautiful? Clara never thought about recognition. She thought about rain, about soil, about whether the roses would need pruning before the first frost, about which flowers bees preferred, about whether the children liked bright colors better than pale ones. She had spent 40 years owning a small florist shop on Willow Lane. Flowers had been her profession. Now, they had simply become her way of saying thank you to the town she still called home. As the first rays of sunlight reached the square, Clara gently watered a bed of lavender, then smiled as a bumblebee landed almost immediately. "Good morning," she whispered. "I was wondering when you'd arrive." A young voice behind her asked, "Who are you talking to?" Clara turned. A little boy stood beside his bicycle, perhaps 10 years old, helmet slightly crooked, school backpack already strapped to his shoulders. She smiled. "The bees." The boy blinked. "They can't hear you." Clara looked thoughtfully at the flowers. "Perhaps not." A gentle smile. "But I always think gardens grow better when someone speaks kindly near them." The boy considered that very seriously, then nodded. "I think I might try talking to ours." "I hope you do," Clara said. The boy rode away. A few moments later, he looked back. Clara was still watering the flowers, exactly as before. Neither of them realized that this tiny conversation would become the beginning of something much larger. Brookhaven was the kind of town where people greeted one another by name. The post office stood beside the bakery. The library overlooked the square. Children walked to school together. Retired couples met on the same benches every morning. Nothing remarkable. Simply a pleasant place to live. Emma Lawson had moved there 6 months earlier with her husband and their 2 children. They loved the quiet streets, the old trees, the playground near the library. But like many newcomers, she assumed everything simply happened because someone was employed to make it happen. One Wednesday morning, while driving her daughter to school, she noticed the elderly woman again. The same green garden cart, the same watering cans, the same careful attention to every flower bed. Emma smiled. The town gardeners certainly start early. Her daughter looked out of the window. "I think she's always there." Emma nodded absent-mindedly. "I suppose flowers don't wait." The following Saturday, Emma walked through the square with her children. Everything seemed freshly cared for. The benches were clean, the flower beds perfectly edged. Not a single weed in sight. She looked around. There was no maintenance truck, no workers, no equipment. Only Clara, kneeling quietly beside a patch of lavender. Emma walked over. "Good morning." Clara smiled warmly. "Good morning. I just wanted to say, the flowers are beautiful." Clara looked around the square as though seeing it for the first time herself. "They're having a good year." Emma smiled. "You and the town gardeners have done wonderful work." For the first time, Clara looked genuinely puzzled. "The town gardeners?" Emma nodded. "Aren't you one of them?" Clara laughed softly. "Oh goodness. No, I've simply been helping." Emma looked surprised. "For how long?" Clara thought for a moment. "I believe, about 12 years." Emma stared at her. 12 years? Clara nodded as though she had said, "Since Tuesday." "I noticed one flower bed needed watering." A gentle smile. "Then I noticed another." She looked across the square. "After a while, it simply became part of my morning." Emma didn't know what to say. She had assumed the beautiful town square was somebody's job. She had never imagined it had quietly become somebody's habit. For the next few weeks, life in Brookhaven continued exactly as it always had. Children hurried to school. Parents rushed to work. The bakery filled the square with the smell of fresh bread. And every morning, before the town truly awakened, Clara quietly tended the gardens. One Tuesday, Emma arrived a little earlier than usual. She parked beside the square, walked over carrying 2 cups of coffee. "I wasn't sure," she said with a smile, "whether gardeners drink coffee." Clara laughed. "We most certainly do." The 2 women sat on one of the freshly dried benches. The flower beds stretched quietly before them. Emma looked around. "I still can't believe you've done all this yourself." Clara shook her head gently. "Oh no, the rain has helped." She smiled. "So have the bees." Emma laughed. "I meant the work." Clara looked thoughtfully across the square. It never really felt like work. What did it feel like? Clara thought for a moment, then answered softly, "Like saying thank you. Every morning." Emma looked at her. "For what?" Clara smiled. "For 40 happy years." She looked toward the little florist shop that now belonged to someone else. "I opened my flower shop when I was 30. I closed it the week after my 71st birthday." She looked back at the gardens. "This town gave me customers. It gave me friends. It gave me enough work to raise a family." A gentle smile. "I wanted to leave something beautiful behind." Emma quietly looked across the square. She had never thought about gratitude that way. Not as words, as care. The following Saturday, Emma returned. Not with coffee, with gardening gloves. Clara looked up. "Oh," Emma smiled. "I thought, perhaps one flower bed could use 2 pairs of hands." Clara looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. "I think it would like that very much." Neither woman spoke very much that morning. They pulled weeds, loosened the soil, trimmed faded blossoms, planted a few late summer flowers. People walking through the square smiled. Some waved. Most simply assumed the 2 women had always gardened together. Near midday, the little boy with the bicycle stopped again. He watched for a moment, then parked beside the path. "I brought something." From his backpack, he proudly produced a tiny packet of sunflower seeds. "My grandmother says these are easy." Clara accepted the packet as though he had handed her something priceless. "I believe your grandmother is very wise." He looked around. Where should they go? Clara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she handed him the little trowel. "I think," she smiled, "you should decide." The boy carefully chose a sunny corner beside the playground. He dug a small hole, placed 3 seeds inside, covered them gently, then patted the earth with both hands. There. Clara smiled. I think they'll be very happy there. The boy stood, looked proudly at his tiny patch of soil. When they grow, he asked, will everyone know I planted them? Clara looked at him kindly. Probably not. The boy looked slightly disappointed. Then Clara added, but everyone will enjoy them. The little boy thought about that, then slowly smiled. I think, he said, that's even better. Clara and Emma looked at one another. Neither said a word. Sometimes, children understand an important truth faster than adults do. The following week, something unusual happened. Nothing dramatic. In fact, most people hardly noticed it at first. On Monday morning, someone had planted 3 small pots of herbs beside the benches outside the library. No note, no name, simply rosemary, thyme, and lavender. On Tuesday, 2 freshly painted birdhouses appeared in the maple trees near the playground. The children discovered them first. I think birds live there now, one little girl whispered. By Wednesday, the elderly bench beside the duck pond had been sanded smooth. Its peeling paint had disappeared beneath a fresh coat of deep green. No one knew who had done it. On Thursday, Mrs. Patil from the bakery placed a ceramic bowl of fresh water beside the flower beds. A handwritten card simply read, "For thirsty bees." Clara noticed each new addition. She smiled every time, but she never asked who was responsible. Some gifts were more beautiful without signatures. Saturday morning arrived. Emma walked into the square carrying her gardening gloves. Ben arrived with another packet of seeds. This time, he had brought his younger sister, Lily. She proudly carried a tiny watering can almost as large as herself. Do I have my own flowers? She asked. Clara smiled. I think every gardener should. She helped Lily choose a small corner near the playground. Together, they planted bright marigolds. Lily carefully poured a little water over the fresh soil, then looked up. When will they bloom? Clara smiled. They're already beginning. Lily looked puzzled. There aren't any flowers yet. Clara gently touched the little girl's shoulder. I wasn't talking about the marigolds. Emma looked at Clara. She understood immediately. The flowers were growing, and so were the people. Over the following weeks, more neighbors quietly joined in. A retired carpenter repaired the old notice board in the park. A university student designed little wooden signs identifying the flowers. A local plumber repaired the drinking fountain that had leaked for years. Someone planted climbing roses beside the community hall. Another family added a small butterfly garden near the kindergarten. Nobody organized a committee. Nobody announced a campaign. Nobody even seemed to know exactly when it had begun. People simply started noticing small things and quietly making them better. One afternoon, Emma and Clara sat beneath the old maple tree. Children laughed nearby as they chased butterflies between the flower beds. Emma looked around the square. It feels different. Clara nodded gently. It does. Emma smiled. I think people are copying you. Clara shook her head. A warm smile crossed her face. No. A gentle pause. They're joining in. Emma followed Clara's eyes. The retired carpenter was talking with 2 teenagers while measuring the park fence. Mrs. Patil was refilling the water bowl for the bees. Ben proudly showed Lily the first tiny sunflower leaves pushing through the soil. Across the street, someone had begun planting flowers beneath the windows of the old post office. Emma smiled quietly. You're right. For the first time, she realized something. The square wasn't becoming beautiful because of flowers. It was becoming beautiful because people had begun noticing one another. Autumn arrived quietly in Brookhaven. The flower beds changed from bright summer colors to warm shades of gold, crimson, and deep purple. The maple trees surrounding the square began dropping their leaves. Children discovered that jumping into leaf piles was nearly as enjoyable as chasing butterflies. The garden slowly prepared for winter. But something else continued growing. One Tuesday evening, the town council gathered for its monthly meeting. Most meetings followed the same familiar pattern: road repairs, parking permits, budgets, drainage, street lighting, necessary work, rarely exciting. Near the end of the meeting, council member Julia Sanders raised her hand. "I have one more item." She walked toward the screen at the front of the room. "I'd like to show everyone a few photographs." The first image appeared. The town square. 3 years earlier. The flower beds looked neglected. Several benches needed repair. The playground stood in full sunlight on hot afternoons. Few people were visible. The second photograph appeared. The same square. Only a few weeks ago. Flowers filled every corner. Children played beneath the maple trees. Neighbors talked on freshly painted benches. Someone watered a newly planted flower bed. 2 elderly men were playing chess. Parents chatted while their children explored the butterfly garden. Julia smiled. "At first, I thought these photographs were about flowers." She paused, then looked around the room. "I've realized they aren't." She pointed gently toward the screen. "They're about people." Another photograph appeared, Ben proudly watering his sunflowers, Lily helping Clara, Mrs. Patel laughing with Emma while planting lavender, the retired carpenter teaching 2 teenagers how to repair a wooden bench. Julia smiled again. "This isn't a gardening project." A thoughtful pause. "It's a community." Several council members slowly nodded. The mayor leaned back in his chair. He studied the photographs for a long time. Finally, he said quietly, "I think it's time the town joined in." Nobody applauded. Nobody made a speech. Instead, they began asking practical questions. Which streets need more shade trees? Could we redesign the playground before next summer? What about planting flowering trees along Oak Avenue? Could we create rainwater collection for the public gardens? What if every neighborhood had a small community flower bed? The discussion continued long after the meeting should have ended, not because anyone wanted recognition, because everyone suddenly saw possibilities. Over the following months, young trees appeared along the busiest streets. The first stage of a tree-lined avenue began taking shape. New playground equipment arrived. Longer benches invited people to sit together. Additional drinking fountains appeared near the parks. Native wildflowers were planted for bees and butterflies. Accessible garden paths allowed grandparents and parents with strollers to enjoy every corner of the square. One crisp spring morning, Clara stopped beside the newest row of young oak trees. Workers were gently tying them to their support posts. Emma joined her. She smiled. "They're copying you." Clara looked toward the workers, then toward the children planting daffodil bulbs nearby. She smiled. "No." A gentle pause. "They're joining in." Emma laughed softly. "I should have known." For a while, the 2 women simply stood beneath the morning sun, watching people they barely knew care for a place they all called home. Neither of them noticed that Ben had quietly begun helping Lily water her marigolds. He had learned that from Clara too, not because she had told him, because she had shown him. The following spring, Brookhaven held its first community garden day, not because the council had invented the idea, because the neighbors had. The council had simply helped make it possible. Families planted flowers together. Children painted birdhouses. The bakery gave away small packets of wildflower seeds with every loaf of bread. The hardware store donated gardening gloves. The nursery provided young trees at cost. Near the entrance to the town square, the mayor unveiled a small bronze plaque. Several people gathered around. Clara remained quietly near the back. She had never liked standing in front. The mayor cleared his throat. People have asked whether today's plaque should carry someone's name. He smiled. We thought about that. A gentle pause. Then we realized the most important thing about this garden is that there is always room for one more person. The cloth fell away. The plaque read, "This garden belongs to everyone who decided to join in." Clara smiled. So did Emma, and looked proudly at Lily. Mrs. Patel squeezed the retired carpenter's arm. No names. No list of donors. No special recognition. Just an invitation. As people slowly walked away, the mayor approached Clara. I hope you aren't disappointed. She looked surprised. About what? There isn't a plaque with your name. Clara smiled warmly. Oh. She looked across the square. I was never growing flowers. A gentle pause. I was growing the habit of caring. The mayor followed her gaze. Children laughed beneath the young trees. Neighbors greeted one another by name. Someone refilled the water bowl for the bees. An elderly couple rested on a bench beneath fresh spring blossoms. He smiled. I believe it grew. Clara nodded. So do I. Beautiful places are rarely created by one extraordinary person. They grow when ordinary people quietly decide to join in.